Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. So, we have been reacting to the congressional hearing over UFOs that came out recently. This has been quite the subject of discussion on X, and so I thought it would be a good time to do a review over it. The reason Cody and Trevor are not here is because my computer crashed over the weekend and we weren't able to do the regularly scheduled podcast. And since they were not able to show up for the, delayed recording, I figured I would just go ahead and carry the show myself since the whole blasted mess is my fault. But anyway, we're breaking this up into 30-second chunks. I figured that might be a little more digestible than watching a full 2-hour video, us reacting to the congressional hearing. So, with all of that said, we're going to get right into it. Actually, before we get to it, we've listened to the introductory speeches from the congressman, and the introductory speeches from the whistleblowers. So now I believe we're transitioning into the Q&A, but we'll see. So let's get into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of witnesses. So I would just ask if it's yes or no to please just tell me yes or no. If it requires more than that, be very succinct because I would like to go down the line and ask as many questions as possible. So for the Admiral this morning first, former DOD official Chris Mellon reached out to you about satellite imagery from 2017 that depicts a UAP. What were the dates in 2017 when this occurred?
I can't share with you the details, ma'am, but I could do it in a closed setting, and I can also tell you the agency that wrote a report on it.
Okay, so who has the imagery?
Why can't you share
tell
the
you that in a
dates?
closed setting.
Can you describe what was depicted in the satellite imagery? Just a description.
It was a UAP, ma'am.
Oh, that's it?
That's it. No other description.
The term that the analysts used, they called it the button. It was a disc-shaped object.
Okay, where was it?
Okay.
I can't tell you that, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay, Mr.
What kind of whistleblowing
Elizondo,
session
you
is
stated in your
this?
testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years.
Yeah.
To put this in perspective,
Are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
it may be both.
Okay.
When
Both.
it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss.
Okay.
them.
Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session.
You can't
ma'am.
even
I signed
confirm whether you're
documentation
read into it?
3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP?
Okay, what is the point of spending all this time complaining about the Pentagon and its misappropriation of funds if you can't even complain about the Pentagon by actually going into detail about this project? It's like we can tell you about UFOs, but we can't tell you when they were or where they were or why they were. We just can say that they were. Like, why are you capitulating? Like, what's the point of this? I don't understand, like, why... What are the congressmen supposed to do if they can't get any details? Or, like, why even have the hearing if the public can't hear any of the details? That doesn't make any sense. Why be evasive now? You guys gave these beautiful little speeches about the importance of disclosure, but you're not going to disclose? But why am I not surprised? I said at the beginning of this thing, this was probably going to be a waste of time, and I think I'm about to be validated.
Crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes,
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
yes.
Okay,
Does the
that's
U.S. government
something.
have any reverse, we've already answered that question about retrieval programs. Do any U.S. contractors have the same?
I would prefer to address it in a closed session, ma'am.
Okay. In your book, you mentioned government employees who've been injured by UAPs placed on leave and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How can the government
Okay.
deny we have recovered craft if they're paying people because they've been injured by recovered craft?
Ma'am, that's a great question. That's why I think we're here again, because I've seen the documentation by the U.S. government for several of these individuals who have sustained injuries as a result of a UAP incident.
It's a crazy idea.
Okay,
right?
well, how do you know that the UAP in those incidents isn't some stinking plane they invented that didn't work? What if they're like baiting and switching the terms in these reports to confuse everyone? Maybe the Tic Tac or some of these craft that have been seen are a different kind of UAPs than some sort of experimental craft that they invented that didn't work. I mean, you can't suss out any details doing things this way. What's the point of this?
The hypocrisy and the logic. Okay, Mr. Schellenberger, I'm going to say it again to be very clear. Immaculate Constellation. What's its mission and how are they funded?
Its mission is to, as I stated, its mission is to, it's an unacknowledged special access program. Its mission is to
What does that mean?
document UAPs.
Okay.
Okay, and do you, for your story and your report, do you have more than one credible source?
I do.
Sourcing, okay. And then why do you believe your sources to be credible? How do you judge the veracity of the documentation you've been
Well, I
provided
judge a
about this
redneck
program?
over an
I
institution,
checked
but
the
anyway.
sources, and they are who they say they are. They are current or former government officials. I wanted to also add that I did not specify that they were Defense Department employees. I didn't specify the agency nor the gender.
Would they have included non-government employees, people that aren't employed by the government?
These are, I'm comfortable saying that these are government or previously government employees.
Any of them currently employed by a private contractor or private contractors?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. What's the key takeaway? Just a few seconds.
Honestly, them being government employees, in my opinion, would be a strike against them. But anywho.
About the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today.
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear,
High res.
high resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean, I also wanted to say, because there was some conversation around concern around the revealing of these materials, revealing the source collections, but some of these are shot from helicopters using normal videos of oceans. I just think that's absurd that somehow you're going to be revealing some secret U.S. technology by revealing that you've photographed orbs off the coast of Kuwait.
Okay, thank you. I have 8 seconds. Mr. Gold, did the NASA Independent Study Team get briefed on what you call OSAP? Very quickly.
I flagged the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program to our chair and our DFO. We did not get briefed, but I believe it is definitely worth looking into. That was probably the largest UAP review effort ever, and I think produced a lot of interesting data, including revealing Nimitz. I don't know if my fellow witness Lou might want to, he did yeoman's work on it, might want to comment.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn to Mr. Moskowitz, who will be recognized for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, Mr. Gold, you gave a whole diatribe for a couple of minutes about UAPs, science, data collection, stigma. A lot of non-believers in all of this would just ask a very simple question. Why? Why is it so hard? Right? Like,
Oh, that's easy.
why are people, anytime they ask, why are they always thwarted? Why are they always judged? Why is they always have misinformation spread? Why is there always retribution? Why is it always met with an ear? What's the why? If it doesn't exist, why is it such a problem?
I think if you go through the history of science, Representative, it is always difficult for breakthroughs and new information, regardless of whether it's UAP or any other kind of discovery.
Well, that's not really a
And
why.
in science, we're supposed to be open, but when you break with the orthodoxy of what's believed, whether it's Galileo saying that the Earth doesn't rotate or the Earth rotates around the sun or the sun doesn't rotate around the Earth, it's always challenging for new beliefs. And the more extraordinary those discoveries, the more extraordinary those new beliefs, it's very difficult. So I think this is natural. There's natural conservatism that when it comes to science, but this issue in particular has been very difficult where, again, even to attempt to study it becomes problematic. But every hearing like this, every news report, every video, documentaries. I was privileged to be part of something Dan Fair is putting together. I think many of us have interviewed for it, a documentary with over 30 different government officials. Every brick in the wall will help get us closer to getting to the truth.
I appreciate that.
All right, I'm going to answer that because I didn't like that answer. It's fear. Every idea, new or old or whatever, carries with it implications. If there's something out there, are they stronger than us? Do they want to hurt us? Did they make us? I mean, there's all these other peripheral questions around a core concept, be it aliens or anything else. And it's if the presuppositions or the ideas or the questions behind that concept don't mesh with the worldview, it's automatically offensive. People resist creationism because they don't want to believe in a God, for example. If God does exist, that implies morality. Some people find that intimidating. Well, it's no different here. If aliens exist, we're not the biggest, baddest thing in the universe. That's scary for some people. It's fear. I don't have a strong opinion about this either way, but I don't mind doing a video like this because I'm not particularly bothered by the subject. If we're not the biggest, baddest dog in town, so be it. Doesn't really bother me, but not everybody feels that way. And so it's also just high school drama-esque type of attitude. It's, you don't want to be made fun of, If you think something's odd, or if you come up with an idea that's odd or unorthodox, you're afraid of being mocked. And people will mock you because if your idea is right, well, like I said, there's implications that might intimidate people. So anyway, I kind of feel like that was a leading question anyway. That was kind of a softball thing. I don't really feel like we learned anything, but anyhow.
Mr. Elizondo, did I have that correct?
Sir.
I'm a recovering lawyer, so I'm going to put my hat on for a second. You said you signed a document. Love that. Who gave that to you?
The U.S. government, sir.
Okay, you have a copy of it?
It is stored in a SCIF right now. I do not have possession of it. The U.S. government does.
What department of the U.S. government gave you this document?
I will
all
say
right,
the department.
that's suspicious. Yeah, that makes bells go off in my head. I was forced to sign a document, but I can't prove that I was forced to sign the document. It's on a SCIF. I have no copy of it. I have no record whatsoever. Now, I guess the government could have kept it, but why? I mean, if the Pentagon's like, you can't talk about this, wouldn't having a document for Congress kind of help their cause and make it more official? It doesn't really make sense that there wouldn't even be a sheet of paper. They wouldn't even give Congress a sheet of paper saying, hey, these guys can't talk about this. Even if they added at the bottom because there's nothing to talk about, it doesn't really matter. A document would explain why this guy's, not saying as much as he could. I mean, I guess they could have kept it because they wanted to make him look like a baboon. I don't know. But that's just a little weird. You would think that he would demand a copy of the document so he could show it to Congress, if nothing else. And he could say, hey, I tried to get one, but the government wouldn't give it to me because they wanted to make me look bad. That is a very, very suspicious thing to say.
In the defense, unfortunately, I can't say in this forum much more than that.
You specifically said the document said you can't talk about crash retrieval. Well, you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club.
And why comply? If you guys are in this for a cause, why would you listen to them? They're not listening to the laws. They don't have any rights to do this. You could out all this out in public in front of Congress, then beg for protection. What? I mean, I get that, a lot of people have been mocked, but you've been mocked anyway at this point. What do you have to lose? Maybe they can throw you in jail, I suppose, but, that would be an awful strong confirmation that you were right if the government did that. Anyway.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just making an observation.
Yes, sir.
So that document that you signed, that you said exists, specifically said you can't talk about crash retrieval.
Correct, sir. It was a limitation on because already I'd been speaking publicly about the topic, and so the document said you can continue saying X, Y, Z, but you cannot discuss the topic.
When you
Did they threaten
give me
you?
The atmosphere of signing this document. You're in a room by yourself?
I'm in a SCIF with a security officer, sir.
Just one-on-one? Anybody else?
There may have been an assistant as well. It was in a SCIF within a Department of Defense facility.
Give me your background real quick.
My background is I went to school to study microbiology and immunology, entered into the U.S. Army, and after a very short stint in military intelligence, I became a counterintelligence special agent. As a civilian, later on I became a special agent in charge, running investigations in counterterrorism and counterespionage primarily, with some experience in counterinsurgency and counternarcotics. And then in 2009 timeframe, when I came back to the Pentagon after a tour with the Director of National Intelligence, I quickly became part of a program.
Okay, I don't know this guy. I know nothing about this guy. If I'm completely wrong, that's fine, so be it. But wouldn't the fact that this guy has a background in counterespionage be a little suspicious too? I mean, we already know that the government has been conveniently releasing this stuff to hide certain news stories. We know that they've been kind of weaponizing the whole UFO thing for the last couple of years. Anyway, if this is some sort of counter-propaganda or some sort of false information campaign, it would make sense to have a guy with a background in counter-espionage helping to lead that particular effort. Maybe. I don't know anything about this guy. I could be completely wrong, but I hear that and I'm like, you worked in the government in counter-espionage and you're wanting me to believe that there are aliens, but the government won't let you talk about it, and they made you sign a paper which you can't show. Okay. No alarm bells going off here.
Was originally called OSAP, that evolved into the program now called ATIP, which is where those videos that we now see, where the Go Fast, the gimbal, the FLIR, that was part of our effort, sir.
Right. So you're not some conspiracy theorist. You actually have a legitimate background.
Oh, stop.
Well, sir,
that.
I'm certainly not a conspiracy theorist. I'm fact-based.
The conspiracy theorists have been the only ones who've been right for the last 2 years. Stop with that. Not a good choice of words, my friend.
Facts.
So when you're in this room, I want to paint the picture for everybody. You're in this room, you're by yourself, you're in a skiff, you're handed a document. How long is the document?
It's about a page front and back. So basically, you have some things they call trigraphs, which I cannot, again, talk to.
How long were you given to sign the document?
As long as I needed, sir.
And what if you didn't sign it?
Well, I suspect there'd be repercussions. I wouldn't have access to certain information.
Were you allowed to ask a lawyer, or weren't allowed to?
Okay.
Talk, weren't allowed to ask for a lawyer to
Hang on.
review the
So
document?
It wasn't. They probably wouldn't
Hang
have,
on a minute.
have allowed me to because.
okay. So you've gotten access to a certain amount of information, which has prompted the government to give you a document telling you can't talk about some of that said information in order to get new information. Do you not think that the new information from that point on, assuming this document thing happened, would have been a lie? Why would you trust anything they give you after you sign the sheet of paper? You are no longer a threat. They're just going to use you to spin a narrative at that point. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you trust the information they're giving you anyway? So, what? I'm trying to understand this. So, the government wants people to know, presumably they would have to want people to know since they're giving you this information. So, the government wants you to know that there are craft. They want to imply that this craft is built by entities who are not human, but they don't want you talking about the crashed craft. Don't you find that a little odd? I find that a little odd. I mean, maybe they really are drones and they don't want people to know that they're drones. That would make the most sense. Or maybe if there are aliens, maybe the government made them. Maybe some sort of weird biological entity that they've created to fly these things. I mean, who knows? But whatever the case may be, you are being used to create implications based on selective data that the government is willing to provide that may or may not even be true. That is very strange. That calls everything that you're saying into question, sir.
As the document itself is pretty explicit about, you have to be, wait, putting me in an interest, let me try to thread the needle here. There are certain documents that we have in the U.S. government that allow people to have access to certain programs, whether it's a special, and I'm going to be very generic here, whether it's a special access program or a controlled access program, SAP, CAP, whatnot.
How many people have to sign that document?
It depends how many people are going to get access to the information, sir.
Okay. Last question. Doctor, real quick, can you tell us about the Omaha incident in greater detail? I've read your background, right? Some people would label you as a member of the deep state, since you worked in government for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But can you tell us more about that incident? You've written a lot about that.
I
this is a
wrote a
different guy.
lot
Never
about
mind.
incidents like it, Congressman, but that specific incident involved the USS Omaha, the littoral combat ship of the U.S. Navy operating off Southern California. I don't remember the exact date. It was within the last decade. And what the watchstanders on the bridge observed was a UAP, again, something that was aloft but had no observable exhaust or control surfaces. So it was something that couldn't be explained. And then they saw it enter the water from the atmosphere and going through the air-sea interface. And so thus exhibiting transmedium travel.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Grothman for 5 minutes of questioning.
Yeah, we'll start with Mr. Gallaudet. During a previous UAP hearing, Navy Commander David Fravor discussed the TikTok object engaged
Right, I'm aware of that
in
one.
2004. Are you familiar with the incident, the TikTok incident?
Yes, sir.
And that's almost 20 years ago, right?
Yes, sir.
It's been said there are more videos, documents, and reports related to this incident. Do you believe the information regarding the TikTok incident should be available to all members of Congress? And in your expertise, what reason would the Department of Defense possibly have for not releasing information that's over 20 years old?
They built it.
Thank you, Congressman. I don't think there's any good reason to withhold information and important data, especially of national security concern from Congress.
What would they say?
I will speculate, sir, that they don't want to share that kind of information because it reveals weaknesses in our ability to monitor and protect our airspace.
Or they built it.
Okay. In your written testimony, you claim last year's UAP hearing before this oversight committee confirmed that UAP-related information is, well, it's not only being withheld, but that elements of the government are engaging in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Could you elaborate on that statement a little?
Yes, sir. Earlier this year, I met with the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and what I thought would be a 90-minute meeting just to meet with leadership turned out to be an hours-long influence operation on me, where they attempted to convince me of the validity of the very flawed and error-ridden historical records report. In addition, they tried to have me question very valid UAP reports like the Tic Tac incident, and even coming to
Which means it's
stating
probably
possibly
right,
that
whatever you came across.
the Tic Tac was American technology. And then, of course, if you ask David Fravor or Alex Dietrich, the two witnesses, they were convinced it was otherwise. And then, and they also cast discredit on.
Okay, well, it could be something that we didn't build. I mean, that's possible. But, I mean, honestly, if they had something like that and they didn't want the pilots to know, I mean, yeah, they could have said it was an American-built craft or something like that, but they couldn't have went in. They might have not went into detail or something like that. It's just, yeah, I mean, it could be that it's an alien craft, but honestly, there'd be no way to know one way or the other. So, I don't know if I'm making any sense. I kind of feel like this guy's a little more credible than the other guy because he's talking about the government going after him, but still, it's kind of one of those situations where if the government is pulling a psyop or trying to do some sort of like counterintelligence or trying to get these guys to say a particular thing, they might use certain tactics like going, oh, and it's American craft. It's American, but not going into detail. Like the thing is, they didn't think it could be American craft because the technology was so advanced. But if people are sitting on technology or say, there's a completely different mode of travel we're not aware of or something like that, well, then that would explain what's going on. Or maybe they're using drones that are making it possible for them to do more dramatic aerial maneuvers or whatever. I mean, there are ways that you could speculate about how this is being done, how this kind of maneuvering, how these kinds of crafts are being built. So just because you can't understand it doesn't mean it has to be aliens. Although, I guess when I'm thinking this guy might be correct, because it's a good rule of thumb to just assume the government's lying. So if they're telling you and it's an American craft, it's probably not an American craft. So that does actually lead some credibility to what they're saying. I'm just simply pointing out, or trying to point out, even though I rambled to get there, that just because you don't understand the technology, that doesn't require it to not be human. It just means that they're probably using a different theory for physics or something like that they don't want the public to know, because these guys sit on technology. The government sits on technology, then releases it when it's practically irrelevant anyway. Whatever they actually have, we only know a fraction of it at most. So anyway, hopefully that diatribe makes sense by the time I finished it.
Various UAP whistleblowers and witnesses to question their validity and credibility as witnesses.
Okay. We'll go to Mr. Elizondo. Hope I got that right, or not at least
Close
not
enough,
that
sir.
right. You're familiar with the recent drone incursion over Langley Air Force Base?
Yes, sir.
The owners of these drones remain unclear. The U.S. military has not been able to give us in Congress an answer. Given your experience with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, how frequently are UAP sightings over military installations? And secondly, I suppose hypothetically, you could have incursions over just, say, regular airports. Is it obvious these incursions are more likely over military facilities than just a random airport?
Here's the question I want to know. Are these drone swarms showing up in other countries? Because when I hear this, the first thing that pops in my mind is some kind of foreign country doing intel research. So if that's the case, then these drones showing up in military bases should be showing up at ours and our allies. If there's no pattern or no sort of grouping of military bases if there's no pattern to where these things are showing up, so they're showing up in Russia, they're showing up in China, they're showing up pretty much everywhere, then that would suggest something that's not, from another country. But if it's showing up in one country and that country's allies, then that would suggest a foreign adversary. So I would like to know where all these drone swarms are taking place at, not just our country's military bases, but are there any other countries that are having this issue? And if so, who are those countries?
Yes, sir. There's definitely enough data to suggest that there is certainly some sort of relationship between sensitive U.S. military installations, also some of our nuclear equities, and also some of our Department of Energy sites. There is a long historical record that some of your colleagues may have, documentation that demonstrates this. This is not a new trend. This has been going on for decades, and that information's been obfuscated, unfortunately, from folks like you in this committee. And I think that's problematic, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have a significant situation here. We have something that can enter into U.S. airspace completely with no attribution.
And how long is this?
And you should go into more detail
Sir,
and persuade
decades,
us.
and there's information that will hopefully be entered into the
Can you
record.
think of any possible reason why they can't release any information they have on something, say, 15 or 20 years old?
Sir, if I could echo my colleague here, Admiral Gallaudet, I think one of the big issues that we have in the intelligence community, Department of Defense, is we don't want to broadcast any potential vulnerabilities or weaknesses in our national defense systems or on intelligence collection platforms. Therefore, when you have a conversation where you address a problem for which there is no solution, it makes that a very uncomfortable conversation to have.
Okay, we'll switch to Mr. Schellenberger. The primary reason you're here today is because you published an article on the news publication that you own called Public, right? Alleging that a new unnamed government whistleblower has come forward asserting that a highly classified program exists dedicated to recovery and reverse engineering of UAP technologies. Can you give us what specific evidence you have, or that your source provided you to substantiate the claims about the existence of the Immaculate Constellation program?
Well, you have the report in front of you now, so you can see it for yourself. But I checked the report and I did not find it based on existing cases. It was new cases for me. I hadn't found anybody. So that answered for me that it was not obviously circular reporting, which is one of the big concerns in this space. I also had the name of the program confirmed by more than one additional source. So yeah, and then of course I checked to make sure that the source was who they claimed to be.
Okay.
I should also say that when I said before it was this database, it is a much broader program than that. It also includes human intelligence, and then, as you mentioned, the retrieval and the.
Any knowledge of what country these things originated in?
No, I have no idea.
Okay.
Okay, I will now recognize Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes of questions.
All right, so that's where we're going to knock it off for this round. We will pick it up in the next podcast. So, guys, thank you very much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.